Most veterans are massively underrated for their migraine and headache conditions, not because the VA doesn't care, but because the system is built to make you prove pain that can't be seen on imaging like MRIs. Think about that. The very conditions that cause the most suffering, the ones that steal your focus, your sleep, and your quality of life, are also the hardest to measure. You can't scan a migraine. You can't see the nausea, the sensitivity to light, or the hours you spend lying in a dark room trying not to throw up. And that's the problem. The VA system was designed around evidence you can document, not pain you can only describe. So while veterans are dealing with 10 out of 10 head pain, blurred vision, vomiting, and missing work, the rating decision just says no objective findings. I've said it before, and I will say it again. The VA system doesn't reward suffering. It rewards documentation. And if you don't know how to speak their language, they will assume you're fine when you're anything but fine. Here's the truth. Migraines and headaches are some of the most disabling conditions veterans deal with, but also some of the most misunderstood by the VA. I've sat with veterans who've been through the absolute worst: concussive blasts, door breaching, traumatic brain injuries, IED exposures, burn pits, the endless noise and pressure of combat zones. And now, years later, they live with a constant pounding in their skull that never fully goes away. Some describe it like a pulse behind their eyes. Others say it feels like a vice tightening around their head. For many, it's not just the pain. It's the fear of when the next one will hit. You can't really plan your day with these. You will cancel on family, miss work, forget what you're saying mid-sentence, and then the guilt kicks in. The problem is, when you finally file a VA claim, the VA looks at your records and says, no mention of migraines in service. But let's be honest, how many of us went to sick call for headaches in Iraq or Afghanistan, or at all? You popped a motion, drank some water, and you moved on. That's what we were taught in service. And years later, when those headaches become a daily battle, the VA expects you to have a paper trail you never had a chance to build in the first place. I have worked with veterans who've been denied for years, not because they didn't have migraines, but because they didn't know how to document migraines the way the VA recognizes them. Once they learned how the VA actually rates these, once they actually started tracking frequency, documenting a prostrating attack, and getting a solid medical nexus letter, everything changed. That's why I say this over and over again. It's not about proving that you are hurting. It's about proving it the way the VA needs to see it. And once you learn that, you start to take control of your claim and your story again. If you don't understand how migraine ratings work, the VA will keep you at 0 to 10%, no matter how much you're suffering. I have seen veterans walk around with medical records full of prescriptions: Topamax, topiramate, sumatriptan, propanolol, everything that screams chronic migraine. But their rating decision still says non-compensatable, no evidence of prostrating attacks. That's the phrase that keeps veterans stuck. No evidence of prostrating attacks. The VA doesn't rate you on pain alone. They rate you on how often your migraines stop you in your tracks, how often you have to lie down in a dark room, miss work, or be completely non-functional. And if that's not documented clearly, if your medical provider doesn't use the right terminology, or if you never kept a log, the VA assumes it's mild, even when it's ruining your life. I have had veterans tell me, listen, I've missed half my shifts because of this, or I've spent more time in bed with migraines than I did recovering from combat injuries. But because they didn't track it, because they didn't know how to show it, they got rated the same as someone who has one mild headache every couple months. That's the cost of not understanding the system. But when you do learn how to document frequency, severity, and impact, everything changes. You go from being dismissed as exaggerating to being recognized for what you actually endure. Once you start logging the dates, writing down how long each episode lasts, and how it affects your ability to function, and once that's backed by a strong medical nexus letter connecting to your service or another service-connected condition, your case becomes undeniable. I have seen veterans go from 0% to 50%, not because their condition got worse, but because their evidence got better. And that difference from 0% to 50% can mean the ability to pay rent, support your family, and finally get recognition for something the system has ignored for years. That's the power of understanding how to fight smart. You can't change the pain. But you can change how the VA sees it, and that can change everything for you and your family. Let me give you an example, because this one really sticks with me. I worked with a veteran, Army infantry, 2 deployments, both to Iraq. He'd been around repeated concussive blasts, exposed to burn pits, and spent years in environments where headaches were just part of daily life. Like most of us, he didn't go to sick call every time it happened. He just saw the medic, grabbed some Motrin, hydrated, and kept moving on. That's the military culture. Mission first, pain later. By the time he came to me, years and years after leaving service, he was dealing with daily headaches and 2 to 3 full-blown migraines every week. When they hit, he'd have to pull over his truck, turn the engine off, and sit in the dark until the nausea stopped. He told me he'd vomit in grocery stores, parking lots, he'd miss his kids' games, and he'd lay in bed with an ice pack over his eyes because light and sound felt like torture to him. He'd already filed a claim before, but the VA had denied it. The reason? No mention of migraines in in-service treatment records. But here is the thing. That's not the end of the story. So we dug into his case and found clear links between his migraine symptoms, his history of blast exposure, and his diagnosed sleep apnea. I wrote a Nexus letter that laid it out in plain medical language, how concussive force and chronic sleep disturbances create neurovascular instability and hypersensitivity that cause chronic migraine patterns. We didn't just say it's related, we explained it. Then I had him start keeping a migraine log. Simple stuff like date, duration, symptoms, what he was doing when it started, and how long it took before he could function again. After a few weeks, we had clear documentation showing he was having frequent prostrating attacks, meaning attacks that literally stopped him from functioning. When we resubmitted the evidence, the VA had no choice but to reevaluate. He went from 0% to a rating of 50%. That single change increased his monthly compensation by over $1,000. But more importantly, it validated what he'd been dealing with for years. You could see the relief on his face. He said, I finally feel like someone believes me. And that's what this is all about. It's not just about the money. I always say that. It's about the recognition and validation. It's about finally being seen by a system that far too long told him his pain didn't count because it wasn't on paper. That's the power of proper documentation, medical evidence, and persistence. You can't change what happened, but you could absolutely change how the VA sees it. So here's how you win your migraine or headache claim. There's 3 steps. Number 1, you have to track your attacks and be specific. This is the single most important piece of evidence you can create for yourself. The VA doesn't rate migraines based on how bad they feel. They rate them based on how often and how severely they interfere with your ability to function. That's why keeping a detailed migraine log can literally make or break your claim. Here's what I tell every veteran. Don't rely on memory. When you're dealing with chronic migraines, the days blur together. By the time you sit down to fill out your claim, you'll forget half of what actually happened. So document everything in real time. Every time you get a headache or migraine, write it down. Include the date and time it started, how long it lasted, what triggered it if you know it was a stress, sleep deprivation, dehydration, noise, bright light, whatever it may be. How severe is it on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst pain ever? What are your symptoms? Are you sensitive to light? You have nausea, dizziness, blurred vision, vomiting? What you had to do because of it? Did you have to lie down, call off work, leave early, cancel plans, or stop driving? The VA uses the term prostrating attacks. That's their clinical way of saying the migraine literally took you out of commission. You couldn't function, couldn't focus, had to go lie in a dark room, or needed medication just to get through it. If you don't show evidence of that, they'll assume your headaches are mild or occasional. You don't need anything fancy to start. You can use a migraine trapping app like Migraine Buddy or the N1 Headache, or even use your iPhone Notes app if you want to. Write it in a small notebook, or use a calendar if you're old school, or use a simple spreadsheet template that tracks frequency and duration. That's gold when you submit your claim too. One veteran I worked with went from 10% to a 50% rating solely because a log showed a clear pattern of 3 to 4 prostrating migraines per week that forced him to lie down for hours. That was the evidence the VA needed to finally see the severity. So go do this right now. Don't wait until you're filing your claim. Start documenting everything now. Every entry you make builds your case and tells your story in black and white. Think of it this way. If your migraines control your life, your migraine log should reflect it. This is your proof, your voice, and your best line of defense when it comes time to fight the rating you deserve. Number 2, you got to get the right medical opinion. This is where a lot of veterans get stuck and where the VA system becomes a maze. You could have the diagnosis, the medication, and the symptoms, but without a clear nexus, that medical link connecting your migraines to service or another service-connected disability, your claim will hit a dead end. A Nexus Letter is your bridge. It's the document that connects the dots between your current condition and your military service or a condition that's already been service-connected, say like tinnitus, PTSD, or a traumatic brain injury. Think of it this way. Your migraine log shows what you're going through. Your service records show where you've been, but your Nexus Letter explains why they are connected. That's what turns your story into evidence. You need a medical provider who not only understands how to write medical opinions, but understands how the VA thinks. The VA doesn't just want to see it's related. They need the actual medical reasoning, the physiology, the mechanism, and the literature to back it up. A strong Nexus Letter lays out that chain clearly. It identifies your diagnosis. For example, chronic migraine without aura. It establishes your in-service event, like exposure to blast, head trauma, or chronic stress. And it explains the medical rationale linking the two, using evidence, not speculation. So for example, in veterans exposed to repeated concussive blasts or head trauma, we know that repetitive microvascular injury can lead to long-term neural hyperexcitability. Basically, your brain's pain pathways stay in a constant state of overreaction. That's what triggers chronic migraines. In veterans with PTSD, the link is just as strong. Chronic hyperarousal, sleep disruption, and elevated cortisol create a constant state of vascular dysregulation. Your nervous system never gets to reset. That's why stress can trigger those debilitating headaches. And for veterans with tinnitus, the constant sensory input and neural crosstalk between auditory and pain pathways make the brain hypersensitive to external stimuli like sound, light, and even subtle motion. It's the perfect storm for migraine development and aggravation. Now, a Nexus Letter that explains those mechanisms in clear clinical language gives the VA exactly what they need to justify service connection under 38 CFR. So at Xterra Health, that's what we specialize in. We are a physician-led, evidence-based Nexus Letter writing company that doesn't just say it's related, we prove it. We speak the VA's language, we cite peer-reviewed studies, and we lay out the pathophysiology in a way that's impossible to ignore. So click in the link in the description to schedule your free consultation today. Whether your migraine started from combat exposure or a head injury or years of stress and insomnia, we will help you connect the dots and build the medical foundation that wins your claim. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about getting rated, it's about finally having your experience validated by the system that promised to take care of you. Number 3, you gotta know the rating criteria. The VA rates migraines under Diagnostic Code 8100, and understanding this one section of the rating schedule can change everything for your claim. Because this isn't about saying, I have headaches. It's about showing how often they happen, how bad they get, and how much they interfere with your ability to live and work. Here's the breakdown. 0% means less frequent attacks that do not interfere with function. Basically, the VA acknowledges you have migraines, but says they aren't severe or frequent enough to cause impairment. And then there are 10% ratings, which are prostrating attacks averaging once every 2 months. In VA terms, that means you have migraines that knock you down once in a while, but not enough to significantly impact your day-to-day life. And then 30% are prostrating attacks occurring at least about once per month. These are more regular, they're disruptive migraines that require rest and medical intervention. And then 50%, these are very frequent, completely prostrating and prolonged attacks, causing severe economic inadaptability. So let's break that phrase down because it's the key to winning higher ratings. Prostrating means the migraine is so severe that it forces you to actually stop what you're doing. You can't just push through it. You actually have to lie down, retreat to a dark, quiet room, and wait for it to pass. Many veterans describe these attacks as feeling like their head is going to split open with light and sound turning into physical pain. Very frequent and prolonged means this isn't a once in a while thing. These are migraines that happen several times a week or last for hours, sometimes days, and require medication or total rest to recover. And then there's the severe economic inadaptability. This doesn't mean you have to be unemployed. What it means is that your migraines significantly interfere with your ability to maintain consistent work or productivity. Maybe you're missing days from work every month. Maybe you had to turn down promotions or switch to part-time. Maybe you're using up all your sick leave just to survive. The VA uses that phrase to measure the functional impact of your migraines, such as how much they disrupt your ability to earn a living, focus, or even show up. Here's the truth. Most veterans qualify for a higher rating than they actually realize. The difference comes down to the documentation and language. If you walk into a C&P exam and say, yeah, I get headaches a few times a week, that's vague. It could mean tension headaches. But if you say something like, I have migraines 3 times a week that last 6 to 8 hours, they force me to lie down in a dark room and make me miss work. Now you're speaking in the VA language. That's how you bridge the gap between your lived experience and the rating schedule. The VA's rating system is not perfect, but it is predictable. Once you understand how they define and quantify your condition, you can give them exactly what they need to see. And when your medical evidence, migraine log, and Nexus Letter all align with those criteria, that's when you move from the 0% to the 50%. So study this diagnostic code. Know it better than the rater does, because once you understand it, you take back full control of the process. Most veterans lose these claims not because their evidence is weak, but because no one ever showed them how to fight with precision. The truth is, the VA isn't guessing. They're following a set formula, a checklist of proof, terminology, and documentation. And the veterans who understand the formula are the ones who win. When you finally start tracking your attacks, when your doctor uses the right language in your Nexus Letter, when your evidence matches the rating criteria word for word, suddenly the system starts working for you instead of against you. And that's when you realize this was never about luck. It was about strategy. Because the VA isn't emotional, it's procedural. It runs on documentation, repetition, and precision. Once you learn to speak its language, you take the power back. You're not at the mercy of the system anymore. You're working within it. And that's where veterans start winning big. Now, in my next video, I'm breaking down how to link migraines to tinnitus and PTSD, and why that specific connection can unlock secondary ratings that most veterans don't even realize they qualify for. We'll dig into the science, the case law, and the strategy that turns a 10% claim into a 70% total. I'm Dr. Marshall Bahr, Army Ranger, veteran, physician, and founder of Xterra Health. And as always, stay mission ready.